Good morning, team. Lieutenant Colonel Goble here. I'm sorry I can't be with you for today's discussion, but as we gather again to address the corrosive behaviors that serve as insider threats within our ranks, Sergeant Major and I just want to set the stage. The expectation is that this be an engaging day with an abundance of divergent conversation. We are not all going to agree, and at times, it's not going to be comfortable. That means we're going to grow. Just like time spent in the gym, if we only do what's comfortable, we'll never see the gains. This is not a one-off training stand down because someone said we had to. This is not a sign-in roster. This is not an entry in DTMS. It's not a metric to be posted to your commander's command and staff slides. This is our culture that we're talking about and reinforcing. By the very nature of our mission and our military culture, our units serve as fertile ground for growing many of the isms that are corroding our society. As a microcosm of society, we will never be free of these things, but the onus is on us to address the concerns as we see them day to day. The focus today is going to be on extremism. As we go through this training, we'll talk about our responsibility to recognize, respond, and report questionable comments and conduct. So, what is an extremist? Well, basically, it's someone who holds extreme views and or acts on those views in an extreme manner. It's often seen around feelings of racial, political, or religious concerns. So extreme then, what exactly is extreme? And who defines that? It's basically whatever is far outside of our societal norms, going against what is socially acceptable, and in many cases, what is legally acceptable. Having said that, just because I have strong feelings about something, whether it be for or against that thing, does not, in and of itself, make me an extremist. Take, for example, I don't like beer. I mean, I really don't like beer. I know, weird, right? If I'm offered a glass of beer, though, I will politely say no thank you and turn it down, and that's mostly acceptable. There are situations where a person may be offended by my actions or believe that there's something wrong with me because of my feelings toward beer, but typically, we're able to respect our differences. Now, if I were to be offered that same glass of beer, and my response was to take it and throw it on the server or anyone else who happened to be nearby, that might be considered a little bit extreme and could warrant a strong reaction from the server or from those who find my actions disrespectful or inappropriate. But let's take it a step further. I not only throw the beer on the server, but I then proceed to knock over everyone else's glass of beer. After all, I don't like it, therefore I don't think anyone else should have it. Extreme? Yes. Does it make me an extremist? Probably not. But could it spark an equally irrational or equally spirited reaction? Yes. And the reactions to extremists can be, at times, just as damaging as the extremists themselves. The violence and resulting property damage, injuries, and deaths associated with acts of extremism are readily apparent. What we often don't see, particularly in a world where things move at the speed of the internet, is an emotional and psychological impact of the messaging. Consider whether someone agrees or disagrees with the acts or concepts. What we see or experience can ignite a particularly visceral response that extends well beyond the core body of actors to those who could be influenced by them. As service members, we have an obligation, a duty. We've taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that includes upholding the rule of law. As MPs, it could ultimately mean enforcing the law. But what does it mean to uphold or support the rule of law? Basically, this is when we adhere to the standards, the code of conduct, principles, under which persons, institutions, and entities are accountable. As Americans, we have a right to our opinion. We have a right to express ourselves. We commonly simply refer to this as our freedom of speech. But we do not have a right to react aggressively when someone else is exercising these rights. We do not have a right to impose our beliefs on others. We do not have a right to violate the rule of law. We do not have a right to vandalize objects or structures. We do not have a right to interfere with government processes or procedures. We do not have a right to damage property. We do not have a right to loot and pilfer. We do not have a right to attack those who do not agree with our position. And lastly, we do not have a right to interfere with the lawful enforcement of rules, regulations, and laws. In many, perhaps even most cases, people who engage in these extremist views and acts, they do so because they believe wholeheartedly that there is a threat to them, their family, or their way of life. They genuinely believe that they have a responsibility to act against this threat, and their actions in their minds are completely justified. An individual's motives, however, do not change how the law applies to them. Most people don't set out to destroy others. They just don't. Their intentions are usually good and what they genuinely believe is right. That does not, however, necessarily make it legal, moral, or ethical by the standards of our society. This is where we need to potentially intervene. In the Department of Defense, the Army, and specifically for this audience, the 530th MP Battalion, such violations of these rules, regulations, and laws will not be tolerated and will be addressed accordingly. Our people are our greatest asset and our most vulnerable. There are any number of factors that can influence our opinions and subsequent actions. Our responsibility is to live by our Army values and our warrior ethos. Our responsibility is to remain accountable to ourselves, our brothers and sisters in arms, our families, and our country. The responsibility to identify and counter behaviors that are contrary to good order and discipline, as well as caring for those that are impacted, rests with each of us. We've talked many times about the significance of being aware and responsive to concerns associated with the well-being of our military family, our squad. This is but an extension of that concept. If we see social media posts, hear comments, or are aware of actions that suggest there may be cause for concern, we have a duty to act. The approach we take is METTC dependent, but the bottom line is recognize, respond, and report. Now let's have a good day as we go through this together and learn from one another. Please keep an open mind and remain engaged. Thanks for all that you do every day. Integrity above all else.